A billionaire rushing to secure a major business deal handed a poor Shoeshine boy a $100 bill. Hours later, the boy returned, waiting quietly outside the restaurant, tightly holding the leftover cash. What happened next wasn't written in any contract, yet it transformed both their lives forever. This is a tale of honesty and destiny. Before we begin, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to greet you. Now, let's dive into the story. The morning sun reflected brilliantly off the glass skyscrapers in downtown San Francisco. As Damon Rodas stepped out of his sleek black Rolls-Royce, at 38, he wasn't just a billionaire, he was the billionaire. The type who turned everything he touched into gold. The sidewalk was alive with movement, but Damien glided through it with the confidence of a man who owned every room he entered. His deep navy suit, stitched with perfect precision, hugged his tall frame like it was tailored by destiny itself. On his wrist, a platinum watch ticked steadily, each second counting down to yet another billion-dollar deal. But today wasn't just about business. Today was about legacy. A deal that would dominate headlines, one that would bind global giants to one of Asia's largest tech empires. Every aspect had been orchestrated, the location, the timing, even the wine pairings. Failure wasn't in the picture. Damon Rodas looked down at his shoes as he reached the entrance of Orem, the city's most elite rooftop restaurant. His deep navy suit was flawless, his platinum watch catching the sunlight, but his Italian leather shoes were dusty. He frowned slightly. This wasn't just another lunch. This was the lunch, the kind that rewrites companies' headlines and fortunes. Deals like this demanded absolute perfection. His client was still en route, about 10 minutes late. Though rich beyond imagination, Damien remained razor-focused, disciplined, and driven by precision. As he adjusted his cufflinks, a soft voice rose from the sidewalk. "Sir, would you like a shine?" Damien looked down to find a boy, barely 10 years old, with sun-kissed skin and messy black curls. He wore a faded shirt that hung loosely, clearly, too big for his frame. Next to him sat a worn-out Shoeshine box, one hand resting firmly on its handle. Despite his ragged appearance, the boy's eyes were bright, steady, almost boldly confident. Damon paused. Something about the boy's presence sliced through the usual clamor of the city. "How much?" Damien asked. $15, sir." The boy replied, his blue eyes firm and unwavering. Damien hesitated just for a breath, then gave a nod and sat on a nearby low bench. "All right, make it quick. Big meeting." As the boy worked, his small hands moved quickly and skillfully. For the first time that morning, Damon found himself completely still. He wasn't thinking about numbers or deals anymore. Just the odd calm that came from watching this boy, Leo, working quietly, respectfully, and with a sense of purpose. Damien Rodas glanced down at his watch, the smooth silver dial shining. Beneath the California sun, his client was only moments away. And the deal, one of the most important acquisitions of his career, hung in the balance. He stood up suddenly, smoothing his suit jacket with one hand and reaching into his wallet with the other. Without giving it much thought, he pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here," he said, handing it to the boy. "Keep the change, kid." Leo's hands trembled as he looked down at the pristine $100 bill resting in his rough palm. His heart pounded like a drum, louder than the traffic and chatter around him. The number stared back at him. $100. One bill, one miracle. He looked up, but Damien Rodas was already gone, vanished behind the restaurant's gleaming glass doors and polished marble walls. People hurried past, some in sharp suits, some in high heels, and some who barely noticed the boy still standing frozen on the corner. Leo didn't move. The bill was clenched between his thumb and fingers as if a gust of wind might snatch it away. He had expected maybe a few wrinkled bills, $5 if he got lucky, but this was enough to buy food for the whole week, maybe even cover some of the unpaid rent. But Leo wasn't thinking about food. His thoughts went straight to his mother, Marisol, lying helpless in their cramped apartment bed. Her legs had been paralyzed since the accident, her body slowly wasting away. He could still hear her voice from that morning, faint but clear. "Leo, the pain's coming back. We're out of medicine. Now he finally had the money to change that. Leo's feet barely touched the pavement as he ran. The cracked sidewalks of San Francisco blurred beneath him while the city roared around him. Distant and unaware, in his small, dirt-smudged hands, he gripped the crisp $100 bill like it was burning, urgent, powerful, and impossible to ignore. The world had shifted in mere moments. Only minutes ago, he had been crouched on a sidewalk, hands blackened with polish, shining shoes for Damian Rodas. Now, he held what felt like a golden ticket, an amount so large, he had to remind himself. It was real. But Leo didn't go to a toy shop. He didn't buy snacks. He didn't even count the change. He dashed straight to a dusty little pharmacy tucked between two crumbling buildings near his home. To him, it wasn't just a store. It was a lifeline. The doorbell chimed as he burst inside, startling the weary pharmacist behind the counter. Leo didn't hesitate. "Mr. Ortiz, please, I need my mom's medicine. The one she ran out of last night." The man blinked and adjusted his glasses. "Leo, did you bring the prescription this time?" Leo nodded, his voice shaky. "Yeah, I have it right here." He pulled a crumpled, slightly sweaty piece of paper from his back pocket. "She needs it. Her legs are hurting real bad today." Mr. Ortiz looked at the note and frowned. "You know, this was written over 2 weeks ago." "I know. Sir, we just didn't have the money. But now I do." Leo pushed the $100 bill across the counter like it was burning his hand. The pharmacist stared at the bill in silence. "Where did you get this, Leo?" "I shined a man's shoes," Leo replied, his voice steady. "He gave it to me and said keep the change, but I only charged 15. The man said nothing for a moment. Then, with a slow nod, he took the bill and opened the cash register. "I'll get it." Leo stood at the counter, trying to calm. His breath, his chest rose and fell fast, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. He could almost feel his mother's pain through the apartment walls, even from several blocks away. He remembered the way her voice cracked earlier, how she tried not to show her discomfort while sitting up in bed, her back stiff, her legs unresponsive. When Mr. Ortiz returned with a small brown bag of medicine, Leo hugged it to his chest like it was treasure. The pharmacist handed him $85 in change, counted neatly in small bills and coins. "Thank you," Leo whispered. He turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Ortiz." "Yes, son. Do you think it's wrong to give money back to someone, even if they told you to keep it?" The man folded his arms and thought for a moment. "Depends on why you want to return it." Leo looked down at the money. "Because it's not really mine." He was in a rush. Maybe he forgot. "And I didn't earn all of it. Just 15. Mr. Ortiz nodded solemnly. "Then do what feels right, Leo. That's what makes someone a man." Leo stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. The sky had taken on a copper glow, and a cool breeze tugged at the bottom of his torn shirt. He didn't go home. Not yet. He had something left to do. He pushed open the creaky apartment door with his shoulder, careful not to drop the medicine bag pressed to his chest. The hallway smelled of mold and old smoke. A flickering ceiling light buzzed weakly above him. Their apartment, Unit 3B, sat on the second floor of a decaying building most people avoided after sunset. But to Leo, it was home. Inside, the air was thick with heat and silent tension. The old fan they relied on had stopped working 3 weeks ago. They couldn't afford to replace it. A soft breeze slipped through a cracked window, barely enough to cool the heavy summer air. "Mama," Leo called gently, his voice breaking the silence. "I got the medicine." From the corner of their one-room apartment, a faint smile appeared on Marisol's tired face. She lay on a sagging mattress, propped up by 2 worn-out pillows, her legs unmoving beneath a faded blanket. Once a strong woman who cleaned offices with tireless energy, she now looked like a ghost of who she used to be, pale, her eyes hollow from pain and fatigue. "You weren't all by yourself?" she asked softly, trying to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. Her back stiffened, her arm trembling as she reached for the glass of water nearby. Leo rushed to her side, placing the medicine on the table and lifting the glass gently to her lips. "Careful, Mama, don't move too much." His small hands held the glass steadily, like someone who had done it many times before. Marisol sipped slowly, wincing with each swallow. Leo unscrewed the pill bottle and handed her one round tablet. She took it and closed her eyes, her breathing slow and fragile. "I only spent 15, Leo whispered, almost like he was confessing. "I'm going to return the rest. He gave me too much." There was a long silence. Tears welled up in Marisol's eyes, not because of the pain in her spine, but from the deep pride and ache twisting quietly inside her chest. "Your father. He would have been proud of you," she whispered. "You've got his heart." Leo nodded slowly but said nothing. He barely remembered his father. The man had died in a construction accident when Leo was just 3 years old. Since then, it had always been just the two of them, mother and son against the world. He gently helped her lie back, tucking the blanket around her legs with care. The accident had happened 6 months ago. A car ran a red light and hit her while she crossed the street on her way home from her second job. The driver never stopped. Marisol had suffered a spinal injury that left her unable to walk. Since then, Leo had become everything for her: her legs, her arms, her daily strength. Their lives had shifted from surviving paycheck to just trying to make it one day at a time. Government assistance came slowly and was never enough. Leo had temporarily left school, spending his days shining shoes in the business district and his nights taking care of his mother. Every cent he earned went toward medicine, rent, and sometimes a can of beans or rice. "You should eat something," she said softly, still a mother, even from her bed. "I'm okay," Leo answered automatically, though his stomach growled. In quiet protest, "I'll get some soup later." In truth, he had already decided to return to the restaurant and wait. He didn't know if the man in the expensive suit would come back, but he had to try. Returning the change was the right thing to do. That's what his mama had always taught him: integrity, decency, honor, even when the world forgot. People like them. Leo stood by the window, gazing down at the street below. People hurried by, businessmen, couples, tourists. No one looked up. No one noticed the barefoot boy who sat quietly by the curb. No one. Except him, the man who had left behind more than just money. The man who, even for a moment, had truly seen him. Maybe this wasn't just luck. Maybe it was something more. He turned toward Marisol. She had fallen asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in days. The medicine had begun to work. A fragile calm settled over the room. Leo grabbed his Shoeshine box and the envelope with the remaining $85. He tiptoed toward the door, paused and looked back. "I'll be right back, Mama," he whispered. In the kitchen, Leo stirred the leftover lentil soup in a small pot, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The scent of cumin and onions filled the air, but he could barely think straight. $85, nearly 2 months of his earnings. Damien Rodas didn't need it. He was a billionaire. The man probably spent more than that on bottled water. Still, Leo sat at the small table, staring at the wrinkled bills spread before him. He picked them up again, closing his small fist around them tightly. He could buy new shoes. He could get his mom fresh fruit. He could finally replace his old torn backpack that always burst open when zipped. But none of that changed the truth. This money wasn't really his. Not all of it. And his mother had always told him, "Son, we may not have much, but we have our dignity." It was the only inheritance she had to offer: her pride, her values, and her unwavering belief in doing what's right. Leo stood up suddenly. He didn't want this money to become something heavy. He didn't want it haunting his dreams, tied to guilt like a shadow. It was a gift, but one that needed to be returned. With one last glance at his mother sleeping peacefully beside the pill bottle on the nightstand, Leo tucked the bills safely into the hidden pouch beneath the polished tray of his Shoeshine box. He opened the door and stepped out. The sun had begun to dip behind the western hills, casting long golden beams across the city. Leo walked with purpose this time, past food trucks, chain stores, and noisy kids zooming by on scooters. He knew exactly where he needed to be. The Orem restaurant rose like a diamond in the middle of the city. Tall glass walls shimmered beneath the evening light. Valets in designer suits opened car doors for women in diamonds and men in custom blazers. Leo felt small again, invisible, But he carried something far greater than money. He carried honor. He sat down on the planter edge right where Damien had stood earlier that day. His Shoeshine box rested beside his feet, but this time, he didn't call out to the guests. He wasn't there to work. He was there to wait. Minutes ticked by. Then an hour. Then two. People passed, businessmen in crisp suits, women in polished heels, couples laughing under city lights. Some glanced at him with pity. Others ignored him completely. A few whispered as they walked past, assuming he was just another street kid wasting time where he didn't belong. Leo didn't care. He wasn't begging. He wasn't lost. He was waiting, with purpose. Inside the pocket of his worn sweatpants was $85. Folded neatly, the exact change from the $100 bill Billionaire Damien Rodas had handed him earlier. Most kids would have kept it. Most grown-ups would have, too, but not Leo. After rushing to the pharmacy and buying the medicine his mother so desperately needed, he looked down at the change and felt a heavy knot in his chest. It didn't feel right. Maybe Damien hadn't realized he'd handed him 100. Maybe he had, but Leo couldn't live with keeping money he hadn't earned. Not when he'd only charged for 15. So now, here he sat, on cold pavement, beneath the glowing pillars of a restaurant he'd never be able to afford. He held the money in his hands like something sacred. A chilly breeze swept by, rustling his messy black curls and tugging at the frayed edges of a worn poster behind him. Leo pulled his thin hoodie closer, shivering, but didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the restaurant doors. Every time they opened, his heart jumped. Maybe now. Maybe this time. But Damien didn't appear. Not yet. Time dragged slowly. Leo's legs ached. His stomach growled. Still, he sat there, unmoving. People don't wait like this anymore, he thought. People don't return money they could use for rent or food. But Leo wasn't like most people. He had his mama's voice in his ear. Be honest, even when it's hard. She'd told him that over and over again, before the accident, and after. And even though she couldn't walk anymore, her strength still walked with him. Suddenly, two restaurant staff members stepped outside for a smoke break. One of them noticed Leo and sneered. Hey kid, you waiting for someone? Leo stood up a little taller. Yes, sir. I'm waiting for Mr. Damien Rodas. The man raised an eyebrow. You're what? I need to give him back his change, Leo said quietly, holding up the folded bills. The two men laughed, shook their heads, and disappeared around the corner. Leo felt the burn of embarrassment creep into his face. Still, he didn't move. He sat down again, shifted on the planter, and focused on the doors once more. The sun dipped lower, painting the building tops with a golden hue. The city shifted into its evening rhythm, honking taxis, blinking streetlights, distant chatter. But Leo stayed, his small form nearly blending into the shadows. Inside, champagne glasses clinked softly across the marble suite of Orem, San Francisco's most exclusive rooftop venue. Damien Rodas stood at the head of a grand table, one hand casually in the pocket of his Italian slacks, the other lifting a crystal flute in a silent toast. The city skyline sparkled behind him, glowing beneath the sunset. He had done it. After months of meetings and negotiations, the merger with a European tech giant was complete. The contracts were signed, the terms sealed. Any moment now, headlines would explode across global media. Rhodes Global acquires Stellaris Tech. Record for $1 billion deal. Executives applauded. Cameras flashed. Laughter rolled across the room as waiters in white gloves moved precisely between tables, serving oysters and fine wine. But beneath all the celebration and congratulations, Damien's smile faltered. He should have felt victorious. This deal would place Rhodes Global at the top of the international tech ladder. More reach, more power, more headlines. It was everything he had worked toward since building his empire from the ground up. And yet, Damien's eyes wandered past the guests, drifting toward the glass. Something tugged at him. Something quiet, something small, persistent. The boy, the one with bare feet and wild hair, the one kneeling on the sidewalk with a handmade Shoeshine box, the one who worked with care, as though every shoe was a sculpture. He remembered giving the boy a $100 bill without a second thought. Not out of charity, not even kindness, just convenience, a billionaire in a hurry, solving a small moment the fastest way he knew how, with money. He hadn't even looked back. "Mr. Rhodes," a partner said, interrupting as he placed a hand on Damien's shoulder. "Incredible vision. This changes everything." Damien nodded automatically, mumbling a quiet thanks. But he couldn't ignore that strange feeling pulling at his chest anymore. Guilt, maybe, or memory, or something even deeper. How long had it been since he'd left the boy outside? 20 minutes. 30. He glanced at his Rolex. More like 90. Without saying a word, Damien took a final sip of champagne and slipped out of the room, leaving a trail of murmurs behind him. He walked past the velvet curtains, into the elevator, and down through the vibrant bustle of the main floor. His polished shoes echoed sharply on the marble as he exited the building. Damon Rhodes stepped out into the cool evening air, adjusting his cufflinks and sliding his phone into his pocket. His face wore the calm, confident look of a man who had just closed a $4 billion deal. He hadn't thought about Leo once since their earlier encounter. Not until he spotted a small figure near the bottom of the stairs. Leo stood up quickly, brushing the dust off his pants. His heart pounded as Damien approached, pausing slightly. When he recognized the boy, "You're still here?" Damien asked, his brows tightening with surprise. Leo nodded, stepping forward and slowly opening his hand to reveal the wrinkled bundle of cash. "Sir, you gave me too much," he said softly. "I only used 15 to buy my mom's medicine. This is what's left." Damien blinked. A silence fell between them. The city's noise seemed to mute itself, as if the world paused for a brief moment. The billionaire looked at the boy standing in front of him, skinny, dirty, clearly poor. But the boy's back was straight, and his voice didn't waver. He wasn't here to ask for more. He was offering something no one ever did in Damien's world: honesty. "Why didn't you just keep it?" Damien asked, his voice quieter now. Leo glanced down at the pavement, then looked back up at the man towering above him. "Because it wasn't mine," he said, "and because I want to earn things. For real, not just get lucky." Damien stared at the boy, and his mind was suddenly pulled somewhere distant. A memory, himself at 12, working in a garage, slipping money into a tin box his mother used to pay rent. Back then, he didn't have shoes that fit either. And back then, he had something Leo just gave back to him: clarity. He slowly sat down next to the boy, right on the granite step. People passed, puzzled by the sight of one of the city's most powerful men crouched beside a barefoot kid with scraped-up hands. But Damien didn't notice them. "What's your name, Leo?" The boy replied. "Leo. I've been in meetings all day. Closed deals worth more than you can imagine. But I don't think anything I did up there," he nodded toward the rooftop above them, "was as meaningful as what you just did." Leo didn't know how to respond. "How's your mom?" Damien asked gently. "She's sick, paralyzed." Leo said quietly, "A car hit her when she was coming home from work 6 months ago. She can't move. We barely manage. I shine shoes to help pay for medicine and rent." Damien nodded slowly, absorbing each word, his jaw tightening. "You didn't think I'd miss $85? Leo shrugged. "I didn't know. I just knew it wasn't mine." Another long silence passed. Then Damien pulled out his phone and dialed. "Tell my driver to wait. I'll be late." He turned back to Leo. "You hungry?" Leo's eyes widened, unsure what to say. "Come on, let's grab a burger, and I want to meet your mom." Leo hesitated, then gave a small nod. He sat beside Damien, the money still in his hand, waiting for it to be taken. But Damien didn't take it. Instead, he asked, "Tell me about your mom." So Leo did. He told him about the accident, the hit and run that shattered their lives, how his mom had been walking home from a late-night shift at a hotel when a speeding car hit her and vanished into the night, how her spine was injured, how she hadn't walked since, how the jobs disappeared and so did the insurance, how paying rent became a gamble and meals got split, sometimes skipped. Leo became the man of the house, armed only with a discarded shoeshine box he found in a dumpster, and a quiet determination that never left him. Damien listened in silence. The sun had dipped further, shadows lengthening across the street. But he didn't notice. The noise of the city faded around them. All he could focus on was the boy beside him, a child who had endured more than most grown men and still chose integrity over desperation. Finally, Damien slowly reached out and took the money from Leo's hand. He folded it and slid it into the inside pocket of his suit coat. "Thank you for returning it," he said. "But I won't be keeping it either." Leo blinked. "Sir?" "Because it belongs to someone who reminded me of something I'd forgotten today." Leo tilted his head. Puzzled. Damien stood and extended his hand. "Come with me." "Where to?" "To meet your mom," Damien said. "And after that, we'll talk about your future." Leo hesitated only for a second. Then he placed his small hand into Damien's. It was his first step into a world he never thought he'd touch, not just one of money and success, but one where someone finally saw him, truly saw him, for Damien. It was the moment everything upstairs, the business, the deal, the headlines, disappeared from his thoughts. Because in that quiet exchange, beside a boy who should have given up but didn't, he found something more valuable than any profit. He found purpose. And in Leo, he found hope. Everything was about to change. The last of the warm afternoon light had faded. Long shadows stretched across the sidewalk as Damien walked beside Leo, step by step, leaving behind the velvet chairs, the wine glasses, and the chandeliers of the restaurant. The boy took off his tie, removed his jacket, and stepped out of the world he never belonged to, into a world he'd long forgotten. They walked for almost 15 minutes. The luxurious storefronts gave way to cracked walls and crumbling buildings. The pavement became uneven, marked by graffiti and lined with old trash bins. The air smelled of fried oil drifting from a street cart at the corner. As they turned into a narrow residential lane, Damien noticed how Leo kept glancing over his shoulder, as if he still couldn't believe the billionaire hadn't disappeared. Finally, they stopped in front of a weathered 2-story building. The paint was peeling. The railings were rusted. Leo led him up a creaky stairwell and unlocked the door to Unit to be. Inside was a dim room, barely the size of Damien's walk-in closet. There were no rugs. The furniture was mismatched and worn. A small fan buzzed. In the corner, sitting on top of a wooden box, the scent of disinfectant hung in the air, mixed faintly with something metallic. "Mom," Leo called softly as he stepped inside. From the bed near the window, a weak voice replied, "Lo, you're back already." Damien stepped through the doorway behind the boy and came to a stop. There, lying on a thin mattress with her legs hidden under faded blankets, was a woman in her mid-30s. Her skin looked pale, her cheeks hollowed, and dark circles framed her tired eyes. But when she turned her head toward the door and saw her son followed by a tall man in a suit, she froze. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice rasping in confusion. Leo walked to her side and gently set the medicine bag on the nightstand. "He's the man I shined shoes for today. I told him about you. He wanted to meet you." Damien stepped forward slowly. "Hi, I'm Damien Rodas. Your son is an extraordinary young man." She looked embarrassed. "Mr. Rhodes, I'm sorry our home is in this condition. We don't have many visitors. There's no need to apologize," Damien replied kindly, his tone soft. He took another look around the small room. There was a single photo on the wall, a younger Marisol smiling as she held a toddler Leo in her arms. "I had an accident," she explained, before he could ask. 6 months ago. I was hit by a car while walking home from work. I used to clean offices downtown. They said I may never walk again. We had some savings, but it all went into hospital bills." Leo stood silently beside her, staring down at the floor. Damien felt his throat tighten. He wasn't sure if it was sorrow or rage. Rage that a child had to become a caregiver, that a mother was left in pain while the city outside moved on in luxury. "Your son gave me back $85, Damien said suddenly. "He used $15 to buy your medicine, and then waited outside for hours to return the rest." Marisol gasped. "Leo, you didn't have to do that." "I had to," Damien interjected gently. He said it was the right thing to do. Tears rose in Marisol's eyes. She reached for Leo's hand and held it tightly. "You're a good boy." You've always been a good boy. Leo wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I didn't want to steal. Even if we needed the money, it wasn't ours. Damien turned toward the window, trying to hide the sting behind his eyes. How many times had he handed out tips to waiters, hotel staff, random employees, without ever thinking twice? How many times had he believed that tossing money was the end of his responsibility? But today, he saw what true honesty looked like, and it wore secondhand clothes and carried a bruised, quiet dignity. Do you have a doctor? Damien asked, turning back to her. Marisol shook her head. Not anymore. We can't afford follow-ups. We just manage with pain medicine and whatever basics we can get. What if I found you one? He asked, stepping closer. A specialist, physical therapy, in-home care. She stared at him, stunned. Mr. Rhodes, we can't. It's too much. I'm not offering charity, Damien said firmly. I'm offering a second chance. Because your son reminded me what it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Leo looked up, his eyes wide. You'd really help us? I would, Damien replied. And I will. Not just with your mom's treatment, but with your future too. The next morning, a private doctor arrived to examine Marisol. She received immediate care, stronger medication, and a rehabilitation plan. Damien arranged for her transportation and full therapy coverage through one of his charitable foundations. Leo was given new clothes, proper shoes, and something even more precious, a spot at a nearby private school. Damien personally met with the school director and covered everything: books, uniforms, tuition. When Leo stepped into his classroom the next week, he didn't walk in as a kid from the shadows. He walked in as someone seen, someone given a chance. But Damien didn't stop there. He kept visiting, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with books, and sometimes with nothing but his presence. He watched Leo's curiosity grow, his questions multiply, his joy quietly return. He learned that Marisol used to love painting, a passion she had abandoned after her injury, so Damien brought her a sketchpad and colored pencils, urging her to create again. On one quiet visit, as Damien was preparing to leave, Marisol whispered, "You didn't just change Leo's life, Mr. Rhodes. You changed mine too." Damien turned back, a faint smile forming. "Your son gave me something as well. A reminder that no matter how tall you build your empire, real wealth is found in moments like these." The sun was beginning to dip behind the towers of downtown San Francisco, casting warm golden streaks across the glass of the clinic lobby. Damien sat silently in a leather chair beside Leo, who sipped nervously from a juice box. His Shoeshine kit rested quietly at his feet, behind the frosted glass across the hall. Doctors attended to Marisol. Leo hadn't said much since they arrived. Damien glanced sideways at the boy, just 10 years old, yet carrying more weight than many grown men. The way Leo kept looking down the hallway, waiting for news of his mother, stirred something in Damien's chest. He had seen thousands of faces in his life, investors, board members, rivals, but none had moved him like the face of this boy, who had chosen truth over survival. Clearing his throat, Damien leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Leo," he said softly. The boy turned, eyes alert but uncertain. "You know, not everyone would have done what you did." Leo shrugged. "It was your money, sir. I just wanted to give it back." Damien offered a quiet smile, then sighed. "I lost my mom when I was just a little older than you. She worked 2 jobs and still made me feel like the richest kid alive. When she passed, I ended up in a group home. No one checked if I was okay. No one helped. I had to fight my way out." Leo's eyes softened. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't have to be," Damien replied. "That pain built who I am. But watching you, I realized something. Maybe it's time I give someone else a way out too." Leo stared at him, not sure what he meant. "I'm already helping your mom," Damien said. "She's in the best hands now. But I want to help you too, not just with school or shoes or meals. I mean really help." Leo's hands stilled. His juice box slipped into his lap. Damien reached into his coat and pulled out a small black box, not for jewelry, but something more meaningful. Inside it was a folded document, Official paperwork. He held it out gently. I want to adopt you, Leo, not out of pity, but because I see myself in you, and I want to be the man I always wished had come for me. Leo's lips trembled. He blinked fast, holding back tears. Adopt me? Like, be your son? Damien nodded. Only if you want that. You'll still see your mom every day. She'll have her own home, but you'll get every opportunity she ever dreamed for you. I want to make sure you never have to shine another shoe, unless you just feel like it. I need my mom's permission, Leo whispered. Damien smiled. Yes, and we'll wait for that. Tears finally fell from Leo's wide eyes. He didn't speak. He just jumped into Damien's arms, holding him tight, for the first time in a long time. Damien felt something that money couldn't buy or contracts couldn't guarantee. He felt like a father. The hospital room was quiet, save for the hum of machines and the faint antiseptic scent in the air. Marisol sat upright in her bed, a silk scarf covering the healing scars on her neck. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Across from her sat Damien Rodas, the billionaire who had turned their lives around. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a soft gray sweater. He wore a soft sweater and jeans, as if shedding the armor of his corporate world, choosing to meet her as a man, not a mogul. Between them, Leo stood nervously shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes bouncing between his mother and Damien, unsure how this conversation might end. Mrs. Martinez. Damien began softly, his voice steady but gentle. I've come to care for Leo like he's my own. I would never try to take him from you, but I'd like to adopt him formally. I want to secure his future completely, but I need your blessing. Marisol turned to look at her son, his golden brown eyes, his strong, steady hands, the way he stood taller now, a boy who once polished shoes for strangers, now carrying the quiet strength of someone who had been given a chance at life. And she understood. This wasn't about giving him up. It was about giving him wings. Tears brimmed in her eyes. Her voice cracked as she spoke. You're a good man, Mr. Rhodes. I see it in how Leo talks about you, in how he smiles now. I see it in how you sit beside me, not above me. You've saved us both. If I don't make it through this next surgery, I want to know Leo won't be alone. Leo gasped. Mama, she turned to him, brushing his cheek with trembling fingers. You'll always be my son, Leo. But it's time the world saw just how special you are. Damien will give you the life I always dreamed for you. That day, the papers were signed. But not everyone welcomed the decision. Word of Damien's adoption. Petition reached social media, sparking waves of controversy. Some accused him of using poverty for publicity. Others, particularly legal critics, questioned the ethics of a billionaire adopting a child with no blood ties. A public appellate hearing was scheduled. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom buzzed with reporters. Marisol, seated in a wheelchair, testified about Damien's kindness, his integrity, and how he had never once asked for anything in return. Leo spoke next. He never tried to replace my mom, he said firmly. He just showed up and stayed. That's what a father does. Damien also took the stand. This boy reminded me what humanity looks like, he said. I'm not trying to buy a legacy. I want to build one with him. The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. The court recognizes the emotional and moral weight of this case. The adoption is approved. Gasps rippled through the room. But Leo looked only at his mother. She smiled through her tears. Go on, Megiddo. Fly. The late afternoon sun dipped low over the San Francisco skyline, casting soft amber light across the quiet street where Leo now lived with his mother. It was a modest apartment, just 2 bedrooms, but it was clean, safe, and full of a peace they hadn't known in years. Outside the window, the laughter of children echoed from the courtyard below, blending with the gentle rustle of curtains as a breeze floated in. Leo stood in the kitchen, a little taller now, dressed in his school uniform, blue slacks, white shirt, polished shoes. He stirred soup on the stove with practiced hands. He didn't leave things to chance anymore. He believed in responsibility now. Leo, a soft voice called from the living room. Almost done. Mama, he said, turning off the stove and lifting a tray. He carried it carefully to the couch, where Marisol sat with a book in her lap, her legs wrapped in a blanket. There was color in her face again, and her smile came easier these days. Her voice had gained strength. She had regained partial movement in her legs, thanks to the therapy Damien had arranged. She still moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but she could walk, and that meant everything. Leo placed the tray gently on her lap. Chicken noodle soup, a roll of bread, and a small bowl of fruit. Nothing extravagant, but everything meaningful. You've done too much already today, she said, brushing his bangs aside. I like doing it, Leo said with a small shrug and grin. Besides, you made me soup every day when I was little. It's my turn now. Marisol's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away. Crying used to be a daily ritual. Now, she saved her tears for moments filled with gratitude. You've grown so much. Leo sat down beside her. I still remember when you couldn't even speak, when we couldn't afford your medicine. That day, when Mr. Rhodes gave me that $100, it changed everything. They both sat in silence for a moment, gazing out the window as the sky turned orange. Then, right on cue, a phone buzzed on the coffee table. Leo reached for it, a smile forming as he read the caller ID. It's him. Answer it, Marisol said, nodding. Leo picked up. Hi, Mr. Rhodes. Leo, just checking in, came Damien's warm voice. How's your mom? Today, doing great. She even beat me at cards this morning. Did she now? Damien laughed softly. And school? Leo leaned back, smiling. Got a 98 on my math exam. They're going to recommend me for the science scholarship next semester. There was a pause, filled with quiet pride. You keep that up, Damien said, and I'll show up at your graduation wearing a suit more expensive than the first one I wore when we met. Leo laughed. I'm holding you to that. You'd better, Damien replied. After a few more words, the call ended with Damien's usual goodbye. Keep being you, Leo. It wasn't flashy, but it meant more than money ever could. Those early months hadn't been easy. After that moment outside the restaurant, when Leo returned the change, Damien had paid for Marisol's treatment immediately, but he hadn't stopped there. He found them a new apartment, enrolled Leo in a good school, even assigned a social worker to check in weekly. But he'd been careful not to drown them in wealth. You don't need a mansion or a Ferrari to be happy, he'd said once. You need a foundation, and the belief that you deserve to stand on it. Leo had struggled with that belief in the beginning. The Shoeshine boy inside him flinched whenever someone showed him kindness. But slowly, over time, he began to accept that this wasn't a dream waiting to fade. He worked hard in school, not to impress anyone, but to honor the second chance he'd been given. Every night, after finishing homework, he'd sit beside his mother, sometimes helping her stretch, sometimes just listening to her read. Their apartment didn't have expensive decorations, but the bookshelf was packed with second-hand novels, and the fridge was always full. That, to Leo, was wealth. One Saturday afternoon, Damien showed up unannounced. He wore a simple gray shirt and jeans, no bodyguards, no fanfare. Just a man holding a manila folder. Leo opened the door, eyes wide. You're early. I promised to teach you chess today, didn't I? They sat at the kitchen table. Leo brought out the board. Damien looked around the room, his gaze lingering on a photo of Marisol and Leo smiling in the park. You've made this place your own, Damien said. It feels like a home. It is, Leo replied, sliding a pawn forward. Mid-game, Damien opened the folder and pushed a few documents across the table. Leo paused, confused. What's this? A scholarship contract. Full ride to Westmore Academy starting next year. Leo blinked. Wait. What? It's one of the best schools in the state. I know. Leo whispered. And you didn't get in because of me, Damien added. You got in because your teachers saw what I already did. You're one of a kind. Leo didn't say a word. He couldn't respond. The lump in his throat made it impossible to speak. Damien leaned in closer. I've watched you grow. Leo, you're focused, smart, and kind. But more than anything, you stayed honest. Even when life gave you every reason not to. That's rare. That's powerful. Leo looked down at the folder again, then back up at Damien. Why me? He asked quietly. Damien's voice softened. Because when I was your age, no one chose me. And I promised myself, if I ever got the chance to change that for someone else, I would. That night, after Damien left, Leo sat next to his mother, the scholarship papers still in his hands. She reached out and wrapped her fingers around his. You deserve this, she whispered. Never forget that. Leo didn't sleep much, not because he was worried, but because, for the first time in years, he was dreaming wide awake. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror in their small bathroom, adjusting the collar on his shirt. He looked at his reflection, really looked, and smiled. This was the same boy who once polished shoes on city sidewalks, who once scraped coins together to buy his mother's medicine, who once slept on the floor, with no heat. Now, he was a student, a caregiver, maybe even a scientist in the making, and none of it would have happened without a stranger's act of kindness and one honest decision to return a tip he could have kept. As he stepped outside into the golden California morning, he didn't feel like a charity case. He felt like a young man in the making. It had been 3 months since the courtroom echoed with the judge's words, full guardianship granted to Mr. Damien Rodas. The sound still rang in Damien's ears like a sacred vow, not just a legal decision. But the moment Leo became his family. Now that every legal form, background check, and emotional evaluation had been cleared, Damien did what he'd longed to do since the day that Shoeshine boy gave him back $85. He brought Leo and Marisol home. But this wasn't just any home. It was Damien's cliffside estate in Pacific Heights, an architectural gem perched above the Pacific Ocean. The mansion had once felt cold and lifeless, filled with glass, marble, chandeliers, and art. But to Damien, it had always felt hollow. Until today. The moment Leo stepped through the massive oak doors, his old backpack clutched tightly to his chest. The house seemed to exhale, like it was alive again. This is your home now, Leo, Damien said. Both of you. His voice cracked slightly as he turned to Marisol, who sat beside him in a custom wheelchair. She still looked frail, healing slowly after months of pain, but her eyes, they held something he hadn't seen in her before. Gratitude, maybe even trust. Leo didn't speak at first. His gaze wandered across the grand entryway, the twin staircases, the marble floor, the high-arched ceiling. He stood still, almost paralyzed, unsure if this was all real. The echoes of his old life, leaky ceilings, chipped walls, and sirens in the night still lingered in his mind. Damien knelt beside him and rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. You don't have to be afraid. This is real. You're safe now. And then Leo did something Damien would never forget. He didn't say thank you. He didn't cry. He just hugged him tight, silent, fierce. It wasn't a hug for a man who gave him a mansion. It was a hug for the man who gave him a future. That evening, Damien gave them a private tour of the house. Marisol was shown her room on the first floor, filled with sunlight, overlooking the garden. It had been redesigned just for her, wheelchair accessible, smart controlled, even equipped with a private medical bay and a nurse on call 24/7. When she saw it, she cried quietly into her hands. No hospital has ever felt this kind, she whispered. Upstairs, Leo was led to his new room, a spacious haven with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a telescope aimed at the ocean, and a full art set arranged next to a drafting table. For when you feel like drawing, Damien said, remembering the napkin sketches Leo once made while waiting for the bus. Leo ran his fingers over the sketch pads, the pencils, the blank canvas. He said nothing. He didn't have to. His teary eyes said everything. That night, for the first time in months, the three of them sat down to dinner together. Damien had asked the kitchen staff to make Leo's favorite meal, spaghetti with extra meatballs and garlic bread. Though still weak, Marisol insisted on sitting at the long dining table instead of being served in her room. A grand chandelier hung above them, but the real glow came from the laughter, tentative at first, then full and free. Leo told stories about racing pigeons in back alleys. Marisol shared tales of dancing barefoot in Puerto Rico before moving to the U.S. Damien mostly listened and smiled, because the same table that once hosted executives and politicians now felt full, with just a boy and his mother. But not every moment was easy. Leo had nightmares, more than once. Damien was awakened by the soft sound of footsteps, followed by a quiet knock. "Can I sleep here tonight?" Every time, Damien shifted over, lifted the blanket, and held him close until he stopped shaking. He never asked what the dreams were about, and Leo never said. But Damien knew, because he'd had those dreams too. Memories of being alone that cut deep, even during sleep. Marisol's recovery wasn't smooth either. Some days, her legs wouldn't cooperate. Some days, the pain came back, cruel and sudden. But now, she had therapists, proper care, and, more importantly, peace. One afternoon, as Damien returned from a meeting, he stopped mid-step. In the garden, Marisol was taking her first steps, slowly, shakily, using a walker. Leo walked beside her, cheering. "You're doing it, Mama, you're walking." Damien didn't clap. He didn't record it. He just stood there, smiling, that quiet, proud smile that says, this miracle wasn't bought with money. It was built with love. 3 months had passed since that courtroom ruling, but it felt like a lifetime ago. Damien had changed, not just how he lived, but how he saw the world. He canceled international trips. He turned down a speaking invitation at an elite investor summit. Instead, he spent Saturday mornings teaching Leo to fly kites in the park, and quiet evenings reading beside Marisol while she played jazz from her childhood. One weekend, as they sat near the fire pit watching the sun melt into the ocean, Damien turned to Leo. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. Leo nodded. "You had shiny shoes and a big tip." They both laughed. "I gave you $100, Damien said. "But you gave me something money could never buy." Leo tilted his head. "What's that?" "A reason to stop running." Leo stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I used to think rich people didn't have hearts, but I was wrong." Damien looked at the boy and smiled. "No, you were right. I didn't, not really. But you gave it back to me." That night, Marisol stood by the window in her new bedroom, watching her son and the man who had become a father in every way that mattered. She whispered a quiet prayer, not asking for new miracles, but giving thanks for the one already granted. Her son had a future. Her soul had found peace. And the home that once echoed with fear now held only love. The grand ballroom of the San Francisco Renaissance Hotel sparkled under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Golden light danced off champagne glasses, and soft orchestral music played gently in the background. It was a night of celebration, a scholarship gala bringing together donors, executives, teachers, and students from across the state. But among the elegant dresses and sharp tuxedos, the spotlight wasn't on money or power. It was on a young man, just 17, standing at the edge of the stage with quiet confidence. Leo Martinez adjusted his navy blazer, his fingers trembling slightly as he stepped up to the microphone. Before him sat Damien Rodas, the billionaire whose silent nod from the front row meant more than any standing ovation ever could. Beside Damien was Marisol, Leo's mother, her wheelchair now more of a backup than a necessity. After months of therapy, she could walk short distances again. Her recovery had been nothing short of miraculous, fueled by compassion and an unimaginable act of honesty. Leo looked out at the room and cleared his throat. His voice began low but grew steadier with each word. 5 years ago, I was barefoot. Not at the beach, not by choice, just barefoot. He paused. I carried a Shoeshine kit and waited on sidewalks, hoping strangers would give me $15 to shine their shoes. The room fell completely silent. My name is Leo Martinez. I lived with my mom in a tiny studio above a laundromat. She was hit by a drunk driver coming home from her night shift. We couldn't afford hospital care. She became paralyzed, and I had to grow up before I was ready. Damien leaned forward slightly, his usual calm expression now clouded with emotion. He remembered it all, the sidewalk, the guilt after walking away, and the unforgettable moment when Leo was still there, waiting, not for money, but to do the right thing. One day, I met someone who didn't just change my life. He saw me, even when I didn't know I was visible. Leo looked toward Damien. Their eyes met. The crowd instinctively followed his gaze. Cameras flashed. No one breathed. Mr. Rodas was waiting for a client at a high-end restaurant. He could have ignored me, like so many others did, but instead, he asked me to shine his shoes. I told him it was $15. He handed me a $100 bill and rushed inside. Leo smiled softly. I could have kept the change, most people probably would have, but that's not how my mom raised me. I used exactly 15 to get her medicine, and I waited outside. With the rest, I didn't know what would happen. Maybe he'd come back, maybe not. But when he did, it changed everything. His voice wavered, but he pushed through. He asked me why I was still there. I told him the truth, that I wanted to give him back his change, and he looked at me. Not like I was some street kid. He looked at me like I mattered. People in the crowd dabbed at their eyes. Some leaned in closer. No one said a word. He asked about my mom, not out of pity. He actually listened. Then he made a call, and everything changed. He got my mom into a private hospital, paid for her recovery, moved us into a real home. And when I thought that was the end of his kindness, he enrolled me in a school where the kids had computers and art rooms and teachers who didn't yell. The crowd chuckled gently. But more than that, he never made me feel like I owed him anything. Every step, he told me, "You're not here because of my money. You're here because you have a good heart." Leo paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. The audience gasped as he lifted it up. "This is my old Shoeshine box," he said, voice thick with emotion. "It's broken. The straps snapped years ago. But I kept it to remind me where I came from and who I never want to forget." He stepped away from the podium and walked slowly across the stage. He placed the box gently on a small pedestal near the edge where everyone could see it, then turned back. "I'm not ashamed of my past. I'm proud of it, because it taught me that honesty is worth more than gold, that dignity isn't about wealth, it's about the choices we make." A deep hush fell over the room. Even the donors in the front row wiped their eyes. "The scholarship I received tonight, it's going to help me attend Stanford University. I'll be studying social economics. But more importantly, I want to build systems that give kids like me not just opportunity, but a voice." He turned one last time to Damien. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Mr. Damien Rodas, you didn't just save my mom. You didn't just pay for my education. You showed me what it means to lead with empathy. And because of that, I promise to carry your legacy forward, one honest step at a time." Applause started quietly. Then it rose into a roar. People stood, clapped, cheered. Photographers snapped pictures from every corner. Leo blinked away tears as Damien rose and walked to the stage. Without hesitation, he pulled Leo into a tight hug. It wasn't planned. It wasn't for show. It was real. When they stepped apart, Damien took the mic briefly. "I've done a lot of deals in my life," he said, "but the best investment I ever made was in a kid with no shoes and more character than most men I've ever known." The crowd erupted again. And that night, the legacy of a Shoeshine boy didn't just belong to Leo Martinez. It became a story passed from table to table, from headline to headline, reminding a status-driven world that sometimes the most powerful moments come from the smallest acts of integrity and the courage to return the change. Years later, as Leo stood beside Damien at another scholarship gala, he looked at the audience with tears in his eyes. "That $100 bill," he said, "wasn't just money. It was hope. It was trust. It was a second chance." The audience stood again as Damien placed a hand on Leo's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. From a dusty sidewalk to a stage filled with dreams, Leo's journey had come full circle, all because one man chose to see value in a boy, and one boy chose honesty over desperation. Sometimes, the smallest acts rewrite the biggest stories. We'd love to know how this story touched you. Drop a comment below and rate it from 10 to 100. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment like this. If this moved your heart, explore more uplifting stories by clicking the end screen now.